The Build Show Build Boston series is sponsored by Allura Fiber Cement Siding, Mitsubishi Electric Train US, Roseburg, Schuco USA, and Warmboard.
Hey, Steve Basic Architect. We're out here, bonus episode, and today we're going to talk about personal health inside a high-performance building. More specifically, we're going to talk about radon. I don't know if you're aware of it, but radon accounts for about 21,000 deaths a year in the United States. Now, if you break that number down, that comes out to a little over 57 per day of people dying with some kind of radon-related death. Now, if you look at the map of the United States and the instances where radon is prevalent, there's a lot of areas in the United States where it seems like it's really non-existent. But the reality is radon can kind of spike in almost any location across the country, even in some of those somewhat non-existent zones. But here, we have a pretty interesting story. Scott, the client, has a friend that lives nearby in an existing house, and he gave them AirThing sensors, and they tested their house. And I won't reveal the story. Let's go in there, we'll talk to Scott, and we'll see what he has to tell us about that story. Hey, what's up, guys? I gotta steal Scott for a minute for you. We're gonna talk about some radon here. So, Scott, if you don't mind, buddy. So, we're talking about radon today, and I know on the existing house here, you're better at having those numbers for the radon there, but then that sparked some interest in a friend nearby in conversation and coming to understand their situation over there, and then we'll jump back here and talk about how we're actually going to deal with radon mitigation for our house. But why don't you start us off and tell us the story about the existing house and your friend?
Yeah, so when we bought the house that we took down, there had been a comment about radon made by actually a prior owner. I hadn't really been that familiar with radon issues. We had a test done in the house we live in now before we bought it, but that was a charcoal test that took, I think, 4 or 5 days to get results back, and it was a one-time thing. And so as I'd started sort of investigating radar detectors and what was a good air quality test, we started with CO2 levels and then moved into finding a radon detector. And that's when I came across the AirThings units. Right. And I think we ended up with 4 of those in the house, and we placed them to see what the levels were in different places. And we found that the level was 16, where the level above 4 you're supposed to mitigate. Right. And I think the comment was that in researching it, a level of 4 is equivalent to having 200 chest x-rays a year or smoking 8 cigarettes a day, from the standpoint of what it does to your lungs. So that was a little scary. Nobody wanted to go in the basement after that for a while.
That's kind of what we consider the acceptable level. Yeah. So hey, it's okay. Just go smoke your 8 cigarettes every day. You should be fine.
Yeah, and that led to having these detectors that once we took the house down, we loaned them out to a couple of neighbors in the area. And to my absolute shock, we had levels of spiking to 300 plus and a sustained level of 125.
So 4 is 8 cigarettes.
Yeah.
300 is you're just smoking the tobacco barn.
Exactly.
A day, right?
So that's led to a whole bunch of processes of trying to mitigate, having them mitigate, and a great company coming out locally and working with them. They put an April air system in the house, and they're probably going to have to do a second system because retrofits are a lot tougher than with new houses, because you can't go under the slab like we're doing here, and we'll go down there in a minute. You can't put it in the slab. You can't sort of separate it with the mat that we're using from Stego. You can't do any of those things. You're basically having to use it as just drill below the slab and do the best you can.
In an existing, you kind of have a micro catch.
Right.
In a new construction, we can maximize that catch.
Exactly.
Of the radon and really get a really wide spectrum of radon mitigation. Right. As opposed to a very narrow amount on an existing residence.
Hi, we're here with SWAT Environmental and doing a sample of radon to sample the air in this room. This is Clyde. Hello, Clyde.
Hello.
Clyde, what's that doing? It's running through a filter of some sort?
Yeah, so it's taking a 6-minute grab sample, which will give us an accurate result of what the radon count is in this room at this very minute. So after a 6-minute test, we came back at 19 in this room. Today we installed a radon mitigation system because we found that this room was the highest room in the house. It was an addition that came back around 120 and spiking it even higher. So the customer wanted to move forward, and we came up with a design for them, which involves, we're on the inside of the home currently, and this is the 2 intake points where the pipe is coming down the wall and into the floor and actually pulling the gas up from under the floor before it enters the home. We have also added a second collection point, so we can hit it twice as hard in 2 different places. Even though it is a small room, he had very high levels, and we wanted to address this. The work is currently done, and we just finished and turned it on. After moving some of the stuff here, we found that there's a cold joint in the basement that goes around, so we do need to return once the customer has the stuff in this basement moved away from the walls, and we're going to come back and seal up this cold joint for them, which will increase the efficiency of the system and give them 100%. This is the label filled out with a U-tube. It's measuring vacuum on the system right now. All radon systems have these, and this label should be filled out. One thing to watch for is that the system, these 2 levels are never at 0. This lets the customer know that the system is not running. We also installed an April airflow alarm today on the other collection point, which will also give an audible sound if the fan goes down for the customer to let them know. So not only do you have visual, but you have an audio too on the system. What this is an adjacent room in the garage where we had to come through from the room that you just seen previously. We had to come through that outer wall to get into the garage, run the pipe against the wall, up and out, and now we're going to head outside and you're going to see where it exhausts. And you're going to see the fan. We had to mount a fire collar due to traversing from one room to another. It is code, and you should always have it. Okay. So now we're outside, and this is where the fan and the heart of the system is. This is an April Air fan. We mounted this on the outside of the home, and this is tied into the 2 intake ports that you've seen on the inside of the home. It exhausts above the roof line, and it has an on-off switch on the outside. It's basically a giant exhaust system.
And having had the 16 level here, and finding a good deal of ledge when they were digging for the foundation and having to bring in a unit to actually break it up, that gives you the sort of the concern that is geologically sort of the perfect storm of where you'll have radon problems going forward. So what we're doing will both mitigate it if it does exist, and isolate it also so that it gives the best opportunity to get it out of the foundation.
Right. Probably a handful of years ago, where Massachusetts, it's a requirement in all new residences to have a passive mitigation system that can become an active system. And what I mean by that is a passive system relies on stack effect, and it's just a vent pipe, where the active system is actually inserting a mechanical inline fan to depressurize the under slab environment.
Yeah, and we have, in our current house, we have the passive system because it's a 2017 era house, and that just is the simple pipe that goes up through the whole house. And if we'd had a problem, they would have cut into the pipe and added the fan.
Right.
And we're very pleased to have addressed this and found it early on, and not gotten the foundation done and the slab done without having come to some solution for it.
And here, just to make people aware, because this is a 3,300 square foot single story ranch that kind of makes a giant L, if you will, I personally didn't feel comfortable that one location would capture everything. So we actually have 2 capture points, 1 in each leg of that L. And we could jump down in the hole here, and we have a mock-up where we can discuss exactly how our radon mitigation system is being installed.
I think one of the key elements also is we're going to continually monitor forever. And we're going to leave these monitors from AirThings on to basically watch it, and it reports on a web, on an app on your phone and so forth, which gives a lot greater comfort level. And I have them on loan to somebody right now, and I get warnings every time there's a change in their radon levels, and it's just a really good thing, because the government says you should, if you don't have a system in place, you should test your house every year, and if you do have a system in place, you should test it every 2 years.
Right, which
nobody
I'm
does.
guessing probably nobody does, but maybe after this we can turn some heads.
Yeah.
So let's jump down in the hole. Hey Scott, before we talk about the mock-up, the fan, and our mitigation system, I think it's really important that we reiterate this idea of radon and the fact that, you know, even in your house, we could have a level over in this corner and we can go 60 feet down around the corner and have a totally different level. And I know that's what you guys experienced at your friend's house, right?
Right, and we experienced in the old house here too. We had a 16 over in what was this about this corner, and it was about a 2 over in the other area, the other part of the house. The friend's house, we had the very high readings in one area of the house and perfectly normal readings in another area and some other in between. And then you have the seasonality, which was when they had the house open and windows open, the living spaces were pretty much fine, but the downstairs was the problem where you had, you know, real basement. As soon as the weather has gotten bad and the house has been closed up, they had the additional problem of the fact that it's being transmitted through the heating system and the ductwork. And so the readings we were getting originally have all changed because as they distributed through the house. Now, the first of the systems they did mitigated the vast majority of it, but they're going to have to come back and do a second pass to figure out another location, and it's a fairly large house.
And if you take that concept and scale it up nationally, like I talked about earlier, is, you know, there's some places on the radon map that it seems like it's non-existent, but that's like your house. It could be non-existent over here, but highly existent over there. So even though you have a state like Texas where it shows pretty much non-existent, I've actually had phone calls from builders down in Texas that say, hey Steve, what do you recommend for a radon mitigation system? Because we tested it down here and we actually have a site with some pretty high levels of radon. So I think the moral of the story is don't treat radon as, yeah, maybe it exists here, nah, it really doesn't happen here. I think you have to be in the belief that it can happen anywhere, it can happen in your house, and it can happen at different portions of your house. So it's really important to get that tested and get that understanding over time.
So we're actually, I have great comfort with the way that it's been planned out, thanks to you and April Air folks and so forth, for this house. But if I was if it is an existing house, I would be very worried and wanted to make sure that I at least monitored continuously, and especially as the seasons change and you get a different perspective as you have the heating system on. I think it's just an important thing to do. We're actually, in the town we're moving to, we're actually starting a program where there will be a bunch of monitors at the library for people to borrow,
right,
and be able to test their own house and see how it looks, how the numbers look, and decide if they want to monitor full time.
Gotcha. So let's talk about radon mitigation for a second. So when I think of radon mitigation, there's 2 things that come to mind. There's the holes I don't want and the holes I do want, right? So let's talk about the holes I don't want, because we have one of them right behind us here. So in your house, we have 2 sump basins. The sump basins basically collect the water around the perimeter of the foundation. They dump it into a trash can style basin, and then we'll pump that out and get rid of that water. But that is connected to a perforated pipe that's connected to the stone bed, which is hypothetically connected to the radon leakage. So radon has the potential to make it to that tank, but if it makes it to that tank, we don't want the radon in. So that's a hole that we don't want. So I grabbed this here from the other side. This is actually the cover that goes on there, but notice that it comes with a series of air sealing tape and gasketry for each of the holes. So we have the vent pipe, and then we have the pipe that actually ejects the water, but we have a weather stripping that'll run around that inside edge, and it has screw holes, so it screws down and basically seals that sump basin so it doesn't connect to the basement air. So they're two separate systems. So that's sealing up the holes we don't want. Moving on to the holes that we do want, we put together a little mock-up here. LDS threw it together for us, and I'm just going to peel this back here so you can see. Basically what we have here is we have two areas where we have an 8-foot perforated pipe. The pipe is now connected to the stone bed. Obviously the stone is kind of a micro component to the radon system in the sense that air can move through the stone. So we have the pipe that's connected to the holes made by the stone. The pipe has holes. It's connected to the riser. Now, we didn't have a solid pipe, so I don't want you coming down on me. We just grabbed this. These holes are non-existent in the actual riser. We just put this in there for the mock-up. But we have that stone there. It will cover the pipe like on this side. So the same pipe you see over there, we actually have it running 4 feet here. It's already buried in the stone, and we'll bury that on that side of the stone.
And the pipe would be, the final pipe that does not have holes in it, would be taped also with the Stego tape.
It'll be taped to the Stego and air sealed up. But before we get to the Stego, over the top of this, we're going to do a natural polymers 4 inches of closed cell spray foam on top of the stone, and then which will provide, I wouldn't consider it an air seal, but I would consider it a tortured path for radon to mitigate into or move into the basement space. On top of that closed cell, we're going to put the Stego home vapor barrier on top of that. Now, the beauty of the Stego vapor barrier is it does a whole number of things. It stops any water migration or vapor migration up through the system. I mean, the closed cell is going to do that, but in any cracks, this will absolutely halt it. But all of the joints get taped with a proprietary tape actually made by Stego or for their wrap. So if you can think about it, what we're going to do is put this Stego wrap on top of the foam, and it's going to be basically a bathtub of this vapor barrier here. So any radon that is in the system, we're going to basically capture it on the outside of the Stego wrap, meaning outside of the conditioned space, and then we'll rely on this stack and the stack around the corner. Now, we talked earlier about these stacks being passive. So a lot of times we put them in a house and we just rely simply on the stack effect to make these pipes move the air, meaning that you put it in a warm house, it's cold outside, the heat moves up through the pipe, it depressurizes the slab, and if there is a level of radon in there, then it's taking it out through that system. But in this house, because of some nearby readings, we're actually going to work with an April Air product. This is basically their Radon Mitigation fan kit. So it's simply an inline fan that depressurizes the slab mechanically.
So it's pulling air out of the slab or out below the slab.
Yeah.
To daylight.
So if you think about that pipe being a straw, basically the fan is sucking on the straw and it's sucking up the air from the underside of the Stego wrap, and any radon that is in that system is just going to vent through the roof as a natural roof vent with the help of a mechanical accelerator of the inline fan. So, and that of course, we have these put in 2 locations where when they go up, The fan will actually be in an airtight enclosure because you can't put that fan into the conditioned space that we live in and share. It has to be broken, and it has to be in its own space that is broken from the conditioned space in its own airtight enclosure. So that's how we'll complete the system. So,
And that's going to be located in a utility space.
that's going to be located up above us in a
Above,
utility
yeah.
space in the corner of the pantry. We'll take care of that. And on the other side, we have exactly the same setup that's going to come up through the walk-in closet in the owner's suite, and then pass up in through the roof. And hopefully we never have a radon mitigation problem here. All right, Scott, I think we pretty much hit every point there is to talk about radon mitigation systems and April air and air things and monitoring. You know, before I think we cut out, we just remind everybody, you know, test regularly. Don't assume that it's not a problem in your area.
Right.
Test and verify that it's not a problem in your home. And if it is, make sure you get on it right away, deal with it, provide a mitigation solution for it, and then monitor it regularly. Go check it out, test regularly, and make sure that this small problem doesn't turn into a big problem.
It's a small cost for the monitoring to actually have the confidence and security that you don't have a problem in your house.
Yeah. And no matter where you live in the country,
Yeah.
consider it a challenge that there's a potential problem there, and check it out. Let's get on to some construction videos. I know you all are anxious to see it. I'm anxious to start building something, see this house come alive, so stay tuned, a lot more episodes to come.